Assalamualaikum, Sir Ibrahim. We are from Group 6. We'll present about National Culture Policy. Our group consists of 5 people, which is Anik Zahirul, Muhammad Nil Shauki, Samsina Juriah, Fatin Zuleika, and Falik Nur Khalis. We will start present now. This is table of content. We will explain start from introduction, policy problem, main objectives and goals, actors in creation, implementation of the national culture policy, evaluation, SWOT analysis, recommendation, and also lastly conclusion. My name is Fatin Zuleika binti Zakaria, and I will explain about the introduction of national culture policy. So, what is national culture? National culture can be defined as human life that plays an important role in Malaysia's national development, which the process of Malaysia identity is upheld in efforts to enhance the socio-economic and politic. This also requires mobilization and includes all the levels of Malaysian society in the continuous process. Besides that, in a country like Malaysia that has the multi-racial society, the process of the national culture development needs the detailed program in nurturing the way of life of Malaysian. In addition, this culture planning outlines the good and noble values that are very important in strengthening the country's identity as a Malaysian nation. The formulation of the national culture policy is very important in developing it with a country that has the multi-racial society in Malaysia. Thus, this policy will be based on the outlines in planning, formulating, and defending Malaysia's national identity in the world.
Assalamualaikum and good morning to my respectful Sir Ibrahim. Hope you are in a good condition. So today I'm going to talk about policy problem. Now let's get started. In order to describe what is going on and to explain process and outcomes in real-time process, evaluators must pay more attention to problem definitions than usual. A key question is to find out what the policy problem. The framework proposed here starts with the assumption that a problem is a value judgment. Whether a certain condition is viewed as a problem or not depend on us perceptions and is not inherent in the condition or situation itself. Defining a policy problem is an act of conceptualizing collective problems or challenges to be dealt with. It involved mobilizing others in a specific way to look at problems and solutions. Hence, policy problems are socially or politically created from an ontology point of view. There are no objective policy problems. Now, let's move on to policy problem happen in national cultural policy. Firstly, wealth disparity between indigenous Malays and non-Malays at the time forced Malaysia to re-engineer Malaysian culture through the new economic policy. Secondly, Malaysian government has pumped $1 billion into the Malay community in the form of direct subsidies to aim the create of a competitive Malay society, known officially as the Bumiputra Commercial and Industrial Community. PCIC. Thirdly, the development of Malay commercial and industrial community that is competitive in terms of the economy can't be improved by the systems of permits, license, and forced shareholdings. Fourthly, government rely on favoritism as their business model that caused many Malay business people who had been given government contracts. Last but not least, political parties also in the ruling coalition have exploited the permission and licensing system that shows they built a formidable network of individuals. My next group mate will continue about national cultural policy, main objective, and goals. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anik Zairul Shah bin Muhammad Anwar. I will present about main objective and the goals of the policy. Main objective. First, developing and maintaining culture active and solid Malaysians in accordance with national socio-economic growth. It is hoped that the national culture would raise the quality or standard of life of Malaysians to a higher and more significant level toward individual quality of life and outstanding quality. Balanced cultural, social and technology growth and advancement are needed to establish and sustain a prosperous and flourishing society for this nation and region. The absence of a few of them would influence the country's social, fiscal and political institutions. This practice can be avoided if the country's potential development is to be properly addressed. Following that, the focus will be on preserving and strengthening the national culture policy. So, it is important that the features of the Malaysian culture must be acknowledged, recognized and valued by every Malaysian so that we will have harmony and a peaceful environment. Culture must be remembered by our people to consider the history and meaning in relation to our own interests and future. It will help to build educated Malaysians who will remember and focus on their culture, society, faith, and nationality. Cultural influences play an important role in the development of the nation's personality, and these features would sooner or later be forgotten as the world modernizes. Study and research about culture in Malaysia must be carried out for the results to be efficiently implemented in daily life. Every Malaysian must understand, know, and appreciate the characteristics of our respective cultures to develop and maintain an interest in Malaysian culture and consider the history and background of their own races and ethnicity. Finally, in order to ensure peace, safety, welfare, and happiness for all, we must promoting and enhancing the spirit of unity. National culture policy will be contribute to this by promoting nations to be polite and tolerant in order to promote a sense of unity among Malaysians or people through a program or strategy for achieving unity. Real and stable harmony exists in societies where values and good examples are shown. This attitude can be learned and nurtured at a young age by encouraging honorable and respectable cultural practices such as loyalty to the king, devotion to religious traditions, and morality in life. This will be guaranteed to keep the peace in our country. Being respectful to other cultures is important since we live in a multiracial country. Misunderstanding and fights can be avoided if Malaysians have respect for each other's culture. The goals of the policy. First, contribute to the strengthening of the nation's and country unity. Malaysia's unity is a possible opportunity that will play a significant role in the country's acknowledging of the identity of the developed country. To keep the unity among the people in our country, the national culture policy must find a solution that satisfies all people in Malaysia regarding their culture. People can be sensitive if their culture or beliefs are downgraded by other people. So, national culture policy must resolve the issue of unity. Next goal is to develop and protect the national identity that emerges from national culture. The culture that we have is the identity of Malaysia that we need to protect properly so that its sustainability is maintained. There is so much wealth that Malaysia has, so the challenge in maintaining it is also bigger, especially in this era of globalization. National personality that grows out of the national culture should be better nurtured and preserved so that it remains fresh. As we cannot avoid modernization, the national culture policy is a way to keep the culture from being forgotten. Other than that, the goals of the national culture policy are enriching and enhancing the quality of human and spiritual life that is balanced with socio-economic development. All that is mean here is to make culture a source of income for every layer of society in this country. If today the community seeks sources of income through large industries such as the manufacturing sector, agriculture, and so on, and also add economic resources that are culture that can improve the lives of the community and can provide employment to the community.
My name is Fatin Zuleika binti Zakaria. I will explain about actors' integration of the National Culture Policy. For actor integration of national culture policy, we have public and civil servants, public and private sector, interest group, and government. Public policy is an act from the government to decide whether to do or not to do. The policy helps the government to plan for the country's development and benefits the citizen in years to come. In making a policy, policy actors are needed for making sure that the policy will work out. The first one will look public and civil servants. Civil servants are critical but frequently overlooked participants in the policy making process. Their participation in policy making is critical to democracy and effective public policy. Public servants make the state visible to its residents and are sometimes the only physical contact between the government and their population. Public servants convey and disseminate the ideals of the new countries, and they help to strengthen the link between the state and its inhabitants. For the civil servants, they organize, coordinate, and carry out the campaigns, seminars and discussion, lectures, discourses, and any other event. In addition, public servants also can oversee the implementation of the national culture policy in terms of culture and arts programs. The second one is public and private sector. Public and private sectors must perform their particular functions in order to fulfill the needs as well as demands among all the levels of the society. The involvement of ministries and government departments in the implementation of this policy is essential in the public sector. For example, the Ministry of Culture, Arts and Heritage plays an impact on the implementation of these policy goals and strategies. Furthermore, the ministry is tasked with assisting in the investigation, education and development of the arts, as well as international relations aimed at advancing the national culture. Not only that, private sector play a role in efforts to develop culture at the organizational level. In implementing this policy is becoming increasingly important. Hence, the funding of culture programs or projects should then be provided. This is because this policy can serve as a guideline for forming and creating a united nation as well as maintaining the national identity in the international world. For the interest group and government, I will explain on the next slide. The third one is interest groups. Interest groups is a group of people who do not run for office but attempt to influence the government policy or legislation. In certain nations, the number of pressure groups might reach thousands, despite the fact that the number of political parties is extremely modest. The function of these interest groups in national culture policy is: the first one is as a platform to strengthen interracial relations in Malaysia. The participation of various races in a humanitarian aid movement can change the society's perception of racial issues that have occurred and have a great impact on our social relations as a multiracial nation. Being involved regardless of race, age and gender in the success of an interest group movement in admission can have a positive impact on society. The second one is interest groups also can collaborate with the government to run a program related to culture. This is to facilitate in terms of finance owned by the interest group. With this, any program that related to the culture can be carried out well, and most importantly is it can teach the people to stay together and united. The last one is government. Government plays an important role in national culture. The government agencies such as the Ministry of Tourism and the Culture is very important in making the national of culture policy. The first one is the ministry arrange the fields such as research and development, education, and art development. As the result of that, these efforts has finally achieved through the expansion programs. Instead of that, the responsibility of the parties involved, like ministry, other departments, and the government, is very important in making the national culture policy as a day-to-day management regarding the current policy. For the second one, okay, governments also should make the formulation and implementation of national culture. Why? This is because this action is needed to show that our country is a developing country with that has a society that does not take into account race and ethnicity. And this policy will be used as the guideline to exist the United Nations of Malaysia and also keep our identity as a united Malaysia. Not only that, with this, it will give awareness to people out there about the correct understanding related to the national culture that helps to achieve this policy and also can be distinguished from ethnic culture.
Next, my name is Falik Nurkalis binti Muhammad Farid. Today I want to explain about implementation of the National Culture Policy. Implementation of the National Culture Policy. First, as a guideline for forming and creating United Nations, which also to preserving national identity in the international community. Besides, culture is an entire way of life because it plays an important role in the process of national development in Malaysia. Furthermore, for multiracial countries such as Malaysia, the process of forming a national culture necessitates careful and meticulous planning to produce a Malaysian culture. This culture planning should identify the good nobles and national resilience. Second is establishment of a National Culture Council to advise the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sports on national culture matters. This is symbolized as strategy that has been implemented to achieve a national culture goals. This is because the strategy aims to increase national awareness and nationalism in Malaysia, as well as to meet socio-culture needs and raise the standard and quality of the art. Efforts need to be made to guide and train supporters, as well as empower culture as a whole as an effective development mission and equipment, such as culture restoration development. This is to enhance the fundamentals of national culture through research, collaboration, education development, and culture relation. Third is National Culture Center will be established to plan, manage, implement, and evaluate catalyze culture programs such as culture research and documentation programs, art or culture training and leadership programs. Because of presence of such an effective culture management and communication mechanism between the National Culture Center and the government institution, other party to obtain and disseminate culture information resources, the purpose of establishing the National Culture Center. This due to the need to energize and popularize art and culture activities among people of various races and socioeconomic backgrounds. Next is implementation of culture activities in a practical and functional manner. This is due to the fact that it can provide infrastructure facilities, guidelines for art and culture, also recognition to art activists. Mostly, as a result, culture economic infrastructure is also intended to raise the level of artistic creativity to a higher and perfect level as a manifestation of a balanced arrangement of values and the pinnacle of state culture. Moreover, among the reasons for establishing the country economic infrastructure is to make it easier for community to research, distribute information and reference material on the art and culture. Next, implementation is Radio Television Malaysia (RTM) has taken positive ways to improve access to culture by broadcasting multilingual radio programs in Malaysia in multiple languages, including Chinese, Tamil, Malay, and English. The purpose is to make things even more interesting. Television programs also have broadcast programs using the other language as an intermediate language such as news, community drama, and entertainment. The next strategy that can be implemented to ensure that national culture policy can avoid racial strife is to establish a general release day. This is because the Malaysia government has designated days of celebration and days of greatness as public holidays. Therefore, this general holiday includes Deepavali Day for Indians, Chinese New Year for Chinese community, Christmas Day for Christians, and most importantly, Hari Raya Aidilfitri for Bumiputra and Malay. It is hoped that this declaration will serve as a foundation for interracial harmonies and peace in Malaysia. In accordance with National Education Policy, the implementation of the new primary school core curriculum (KBSR) aims to produce individuals that are well in terms of knowledge, skills, and morals. This is intended to encourage multiracial students to be disciplined and well-trained. Through the national education system, the implementation of the core curriculum has increased Malaysian national awareness among the multiracial community. Next, the government has established a Malay, Chinese, and Indian department. As a result, local educational institutions have provided a variety of courses for students of all races who is interested in learning a foreign language. Therefore, local universities such as University Malaya and University Kebangsaan Malaysia have developed departments of Chinese and Tamil studies. Last but not least is to integrate art activities such as Taekwondo, material art from China, Selimbang, material art from Indian, and Silat Cekak, material art from Malaysia, which is a collection of material art that has been practiced in Malaysia for a long time. Malaysians, regardless of race or ethnicity, incorporate material art into every favorite sport at various levels.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sir, my name is Samsina Juda binti Shamsuddin. I'm going to present about evaluation using SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis helps to identify issues and problems that may occur in the future. So, to avoid any trouble, it is a must to use the technique. SWOT analysis also can be used to evaluate whether the policy is effective or not. The strength of the national culture policy is that Malaysia is acknowledged as having various types of races and culture. Malay, Chinese, Indian and many more races have lived together even before our country's Independence Day. Malaysians are used to this because they already recognize the culture of another races, which make it our strength in achieving the goals in the national culture policy of unity among Malaysians. Next, the distinct culture in our country. Each race, religion, state have different culture which make our country unique. This distinct culture encourage people to respect each other's culture. The next weakness of the national culture policy. The national culture policy is unable to reach people's attention because of the modernization in our country. People tend to forget or ignore the culture. The culture of each race seems lame and unimportant for them. The next weakness is that Malaysia are prejudiced against another races. It is because they lack knowledge of other races' culture. It can cause misjudgment. For example, other races complain about the loud noise during the festival like Chinese New Year and Hari Raya Aidilfitri. It can break the unity in our country. Other than that, the opportunity in the national culture policy is the COVID-19 pandemic. Because people are not allowed to travel outside the country, the national culture policy can encourage people to travel around the country and learn about another race's culture in our country. Another opportunity is because people are staying at home, they spend time more on TV and telephone. So, the government should promote our culture on social media platform, television advertisement and dramas. It can educate people more about our unique culture. Threat in our national culture policy are there are some culture that our country has similar with another country. It can cause misunderstanding the root of the culture. For example, rendang, which is our famous food during Hari Raya, has been claimed by Indonesia as theirs. In fact, we share similar food or culture since we are neighboring country. The next threat culture come from other nations, which become famous among Malaysians. For example, our clothing style is influenced by Western style. People rarely wear our traditional clothes unless there are festival or formal event. It can be a threat because people in Malaysia will ignore our traditional clothes. Assalamualaikum sir, I am Samsina Jura binti Shamsuddin. I'm going to present about the recommendation. Recommendation. Based on the evaluation, these are the recommendations on the national culture policy to improve the policy. Firstly, we need to normalize the beauty of each culture. To educate Malaysian people about other culture, the government can hold a culture festival where many people can join and experience various culture in our country. By normalizing it, we can ensure that the culture won't vanish and be forgotten. Most importantly, Malaysian people must join and be involved in the festival to learn about other culture. Next, the government can hire songwriter or composer in Malaysia who can compose song and have element multiracial culture to promote Malaysian music style and choreographer that can teach the new generation about our traditional dances. This is important to keep our culture remembered by our people because people give attention to Korean pop wave and Western music rather than our songs and dance. To keep the culture appreciated, Malaysians must support the local artists in order to protect the culture from being ignored. Another recommendation is the collaboration with the National Department for Culture and Arts to showcase our culture. For example, holding an event where Malaysians can wear their traditional clothes. Fashion designers also can take the opportunity to create cultural clothing like chonsam and sari to more convenient and fashionable so that many people can wear them. Lastly, encourage youngsters to join in fun cultural activity or program. They should exposed to various type of culture from primary school. The syllabus in school must teach about culture in Malaysia and ensure that students can appreciate the beauty of our culture in our country. Youngsters are the next generation and the country futures. So the national culture must make sure that youngsters can preserve the culture so it won't disappear. Conclusion. The National Culture Policy is a policy that is important for our country. Policymakers and policy actors are also important to implement the policy criteria which is useful to conserve the culture so it can be remembered and practiced by Malaysian people in our daily life. Objective and the goals of the National Culture Policy must be achieved so that the policy works that will allow people to get to know the culture in Malaysia and ensure that we gain knowledge of our culture.